Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. America's border control system is collapsing into dust. Lawmakers in Washington are doing nothing about it still. Now the crisis has gotten so bad that the Border Patrol is transporting illegal immigrants deep into the United States and then simply leaving them at bus stops. Trace Gallagher has more on this developing story tonight. Trace?
Tucker, in the past 7 months, ending in April, the Border Patrol in just the El Centro sector has apprehended 293,000 migrants. That's a 400% increase from a year earlier. And because housing facilities are overflowing and because of legal limits on how long migrant children can be held, border agents are now loading migrants into vans and buses and driving them 150 miles away to a Greyhound bus station in San Bernardino. We saw the drop-offs firsthand in San Bernardino last week. The migrants are released pending court dates, but of course the vast majority never show up for court. Critics say the migrants shouldn't be dumped at the bus station with no resources, but migrants interviewed by Reuters say they feel safe in the U.S. and were treated well by border agents. Remember, El Centro is one of 9 sectors along the U.S.-Mexico border, and it's like this at all of them. Customs and Border Protection calls the situation both a humanitarian and operational crisis. Meantime, about 30 miles from San Bernardino, an unknown number of migrants were flown to the Border Patrol facility in Murrieta, California. But some members of the community were quick to stand in front of the Border Patrol gates to let the migrants know they were not welcome to stay. Murrieta residents say they heard the migrants would eventually be dropped off at strip malls and bus stations, but the Murrieta police now say none of the migrants are being released, though it is very unclear where they will go next. Tucker.
That is the question. Trace Gallagher on that story for us. Thanks a lot, Trace. Yep. So take 3 steps back and assess what you've just heard. Federal agents are dumping thousands of illegal aliens at bus stations and then simply walking away. They don't want to do it. They have no choice. Congress won't help them. Our system is in total collapse. Nobody's even trying to protect you or our country. Carson is a U.S. senator and a Democratic presidential candidate. She thinks what is happening is just fine. On Sunday, Gillibrand went on television to explain that we have no right to detain illegal immigrants. Instead, they should be released directly into our country.
But you oppose even what the Obama administration did in terms of keeping families together or keeping them together for a longer period of time in detention?
I wouldn't, as president of the United States, I wouldn't use the detention system at all.
Homeland Security, though, is saying hundreds of thousands of people are crossing the border, and they need to go somewhere before their asylum claims are actually heard. What would you do with them?
They don't need to be incarcerated. They can, if they're given a lawyer and given a process, they will follow it.
It goes without saying that functioning societies don't operate like this. Countries that care about their people enforce their own laws. Our leaders are decadent and narcissistic. They care only about themselves. They will never defend our nation. That's obvious, and the rest of the world knows it. The American piñata has been getting pummeled for decades, and now it has finally come apart. Our national wealth is up for grabs by whomever gets here first, and they are coming. Over just the past year, 1% of the entire population of the nation of Guatemala has moved to the United States. The Wall Street Journal piece last month described the plight of that country's villages. Some of them are literally depopulating as people stream north to America's generous welfare state. Meanwhile, a new study from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, FAIR, given exclusively to this show, shows the scale on which the United States is being plundered. Every year, FAIR found, foreign-born workers send about $150 billion in remittances to their friends and family overseas. That's more than the GDP of 18 American states. Illegal aliens alone are remitting $28 billion a year. That's $28 billion leaving this country, going abroad every year from people who don't even have the legal right to work here in the first place, but are benefiting, of course, from all the extras: free health care, free education, subsidized housing, food stamps, who knows what else. The remittances are not taxed. In the case of illegal immigrants working under the table, their original earnings have never been taxed either. So this is a disaster, but it's not a natural disaster. We could have prevented it. With a wall, mandatory e-verify, remittance taxes, an efficient deportation process, you could easily fix this crisis. It wouldn't take much. It's not fixed because Congress doesn't want to fix it. Just today, HUD Secretary Ben Carson faced a hostile reception on Capitol Hill. Why? Because he dared to suggest that illegal aliens should be ineligible for public housing. Watch this exchange with Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney of New York.
Mr. Secretary, the D in HUD does not stand for deportation. I'm afraid that a recent proposal of yours will bring nothing but despair to thousands of American families by throwing children out of their homes. And what is your plan to take care of them?
Well, if you read the rule carefully, you will see that it provides a 6-month deferral on request if they have not found another place to live. And that can be renewed 2 times for a total of 18 months, which is plenty of time for Congress to engage in comprehensive immigration reform so that this becomes a moot point, as does the DACA situation and 100 other things.
Secretary Ben Carson joins us tonight. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
As you well know, Congresswoman Maloney called your proposal, quote, despicable. But it's my understanding that it's illegal for illegal aliens to be living in public housing in the first place, is it not?
That's correct. Section 214 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1980 specifically states that the Secretary of HUD is prohibited from providing housing assistance to people who are in the country illegally. And what people sometimes don't understand is that we have millions of legal Americans in line waiting for these very scarce resources. What Congresswoman and many others also don't realize is that we have provided a mechanism whereby people who are affected, illegals who are affected, and can't find housing can have delayed action for 6 months, which can be renewed twice for a total of 18 months, which of course is plenty of time for Congress to do its job. So, for them to suggest that I should break the law, what is the real implication? That we can just pick and choose the laws we want to enforce and embrace? Of course we feel sympathy for people. Of course we don't want anybody out on the streets. But the real thing that is hurting people is our failure to address this immigration system, the rules that are drawing people here and keeping them here, and that are so unfair to American citizens who have been paying taxes and working here. We take in 1.1 million people legally through our immigration system, which is far more than any other country, and let that system work. But it can't work when we have all these perverse incentives which are drawing people here.
So we have hundreds of thousands of Americans sleeping outside every night who are homeless, and they're everywhere.
Absolutely.
And you're telling us that there are many thousands of illegal aliens living at public expense in public housing, and Congress has some concern about what's going to, I mean, why would that be a concern at all? Foreign citizens breaking our laws, why wouldn't we spend all of our time and all of our money, all of our energy worrying about Americans who are living on the streets?
Well, you would think we would do that. Whenever you get on an airplane, in the initial announcements, they say if there's an emergency, your oxygen mask will drop down, put yours on first, and then assist your neighbor. Obviously, we need to take care of our people. Doesn't mean that we're not compassionate people. It means that we're logical people. And let's take care of our people. I'm very happy. I told Congresswoman and others, if you can find a way that I can legally do what you want me to do, please tell me what it is. I'm all ears.
How did she respond?
Change the subject, of course. They don't seem to want to deal with the ideal that Congress is the one who makes the laws. Instead, they rather just say to you, why don't you break the law so that we can feel good about ourselves? Why don't they do their jobs? That's what they were elected to do. The American people have a real choice to make here. They need to decide what kind of people do they want representing us. And it can't just be somebody whose name you recognize. It needs to be people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the tough things that need to be done in order for our country to prosper. And when our country is prosperous, I think we can then turn our attention to some of these other countries and see what we can do to help them. But we need to get ours in order first.
So Congresswoman Maloney is pressuring you to break the law. She is a lawmaker. She could try to change the law. She's not bothering. Isn't that prima facie evidence that she's not a serious person? I mean, that's buffoonish.
Well, it is very sad. It would be nice if she were the only one, but there are many who feel that way, and I don't think they've really thought through what's going on. They just allow themselves to be caught up in the moment, and you know, they want to be popular, and they're not thinking long term about what the impact is of what they're doing. They're not thinking about our children and our grandchildren and what they will have to face. It's just what makes me look good today.
I've noticed. Secretary Ben Carson, thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Tucker.